the project.
Sorry.
Nope. Okay, so so Darcy Damon is probably going to join us. If you just keep an eye out for him, I'm going to go ahead and get started because we've got a pretty full agenda.
Sure.
And maybe when he joins, we just sort of acknowledge that and for the record, but we have a quorum now. So with that, got a lot of folks on the call here. My name is Rick McDonald. I am the chair of the West University Historic Zone Advisory Board, and we're going to do a little quick roll call and call to order for this meeting. This is the West University Historic Zone Advisory Board meeting for Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. It looks like we're starting at 6:03 p.m. And if I could do a quick roll call of who we've got online from the board, starting with Darcy Hazebaker.
Present.
Present. Sarah Parado.
Present.
Betsy Besnick.
Present.
And Rachel Sarah.
Here.
Okay, cool. And I still don't see Damon yet. So we'll go ahead. And this is Rick McDonald. I'm present. All right. So we have a quorum. Item number 2 on the agenda is the approval of the LAR from our last meeting. I hope everyone on the board had a chance to take a quick look at it or take a look at it. Can I get a motion?
This is Rachel Sarah. I motion to approve.
Second? Anyone? This is Rick McDonald. I'll second. I'm not sure who all was here last time. So with that, yeah, we got a bunch of people joining. All in favor? Aye.
Rachel Sarah, I.
Donald, aye. I'm sorry, Darcy.
Betsy, I.
Betsy, aye. Darcy,
I was not here, so I have to abstain.
you're abstaining. Okay, and I'm sorry, did I get Sarah?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we had 4 ayes and 1 abstain. LAR is approved. All right, item number 3 on the agenda, call to the audience. Jody, there was a call to the audience, correct?
There was a call to the audience. Do you want me to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, yes, please.
So this is from Ken Scoville. He is a member of the Tucson-Pima County Historical Commission, but he is expressing these views as a private citizen with years of experience in historic preservation. None of these comments are representative of the commission. Last month, I wrote that Capstone was taking the wrong approach to their proposed development. It was apparent after watching their presentation that they will continue this negative approach to this location. They are free to propose a nuclear waste disposal site for this location, but it would fail given the current zoning. I'm using this example because of the underlying zoning or the buffer overlay, which is part of the main gate overlay that does not allow that what Capstone is proposing. The project is also in the West University Historic District with the HPZ requirements. If you're not talking, please mute yourself. Thank you. Another mid-rise development at this location would necessitate a rezoning, and given the past remarks of the council person for this area, may not be supported any more than a nuclear disposal site. The flow chart that is being followed seems to allow a cloak over the actual design of the project so that it goes forward in the process. The economic analysis of the historic properties to be demolished by moving produces a cash flow, but obviously cannot achieve their mantra of, quote, highest and best use. A historic district would consider the highest and best use either as a rental with cash flow or an adaptive reuse of the existing historic structure with contributing building in its original location. Some of us in our society always worship highest and best use with the maximum profit and the loss of historic resources or nature preserves. It is also curious that the proposal now includes options on 2 historic properties south of the proposed development that would be retained with an adaptive reuse. Now adaptive reuse is a viable as an economic reuse as long as it does not involve the historic properties that the developer wants to relocate, in parentheses, demolish. The existing historic properties for which Capstone has an option would likely generate more income if they were not being subjected to demolition by neglect by their owners as they wait with fingers crossed that the mid-rise will become reality and the properties are moved or demolished. The one historic property constructed of Adobe has not been formally evaluated by an expert such as architect Bob Vint to get an estimate of the cost involved for repairs so that this property could become a home, rental for income, or adaptive reuse. I know from past experience that even minor repairs can receive a condemnation designation when it is politically helpful to say that a historic building is condemned. To a layperson, this means that it cannot be restored, and this ends questions that should always be asked before the statement that a building cannot be saved. In this circumstance, given that the developer cannot move even a perfectly fine mud adobe building, fits nicely in their proposal that it cannot be repaired and is currently inhabitable. All this without a formal evaluation from an expert like Bob Vitt. More questions need to be asked concerning the current zonings, demolition by neglect, lack of details related to the Adobe residence, and a final design for the proposed development. It appears that the flow chart was designed so that Capstone could have a way to keep this proposal moving forward with fingers crossed by the developer that the issues of this location will vanish in the future. And that's the end of that.
Also, I just want to add that Damon Turner joined at 6:06.
Okay. Hey, Damon.
Hi.
All right.
Thank you, Jody, for reading.
Yeah, thank you, Jody, for reading. And we have two folk on the line who we only see as phone numbers. So for the record, could 520-245-8696 please identify yourself for our...
Yeah, this is Joel Ireland.
Joel. Okay, thank you, Joel.
Joel
And then,
Ireland.
yep. And then 260-568-3989, please.
Oh, that one is going to have to unmute themselves. There was feedback, so I muted them. Maria, I think it's the
Mover.
Oh yeah, what was that number to unmute? It was like star crap. No, that was no, it wasn't star crap. Sorry.
It's a 260 number.
Yeah, it's a. Oh, there he unmuted.
Mark Buckingham.
There we go.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, item number 4 on our agenda, Tucson-Pima County Historic Commission separation update. Jody, any updates for us tonight?
We are still on a hold with that and still looking for a date to take it to council. Once we have a date for it to go to mayor and council, I will notify everybody.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. That brings us to the main body of the agenda. Before we get started, everybody, there's 3 items we have on the agenda. You can tell from the number of folk that are on the line right now, we've got a lot of material to cover. Very different projects. Everyone's got a specific time allotment, and I'm going to have to be kind of fastidious about keeping us to that time allotment so that we honor the ability to get through all 3 items tonight. So I apologize in advance if I seem like I'm maybe cutting folks off a little early, but I do need to watch the time so that we can get through all 3 items. And with that, item 5A on the agenda is the Capstone project, HPZ 22053 through 22058. And Noel, are you starting us off tonight?
Be happy to, Chair.
Okay.
And again, thank you for the time. Noel Grumsman with Snell and Wilmer, 400 East Van Buren, for the record, in Phoenix. And here again on behalf of Capstone, and you can see quite a few of the team members here. And today's really kind of a continuation of our prior presentation to talk a little bit about the relocation strategy, as well as some of the economic analysis that there were some questions on. So what I'll do briefly is just share a few of these slides here, and then we've got our mover on here to introduce himself. So just as a refresher, the relocation plan is to go from Speedway and Euclid about 2 blocks west, and then about 2 blocks south to 2nd Avenue and 1st Street. And the relocation plan, and we shared before, again, is the relocation of 4 of the homes onto the one existing lot on 2nd Avenue, where there are 2 existing structures, and a placement of one of the homes at 1st and 2nd, taking out a non-contributing structure there. So I think from a relocation strategy standpoint, the idea is to move the homes there, and once they're set, then the homes would be rehabilitated and restored to standards that Roger's been assisting with, as far as putting the balconies back on and the bringing the exteriors up to date. With that work, there'll be additional interior work and things that the landowner will be doing to make the units' interior spaces habitable and useful, and returning those residents back to being residents within the community. So I wanted to have briefly our representative of our moving company, Wolf House and Building Movers, just chat a little bit about the strategy and some of their experience. So I believe, and I apologize, Roger, who did we bring on from Wolf? I apologize.
It is Mark Buckingham, who is on the line, ready to
Great.
speak. And I
Great,
sent you
Mark.
some images we can share.
Perfect. So Mark, I have a few images of some of your moves here that are available. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and chat a little bit about kind of your process and experience.
Sure. I'm Mark with the Wolf House Movers, and we have moved many structures over the years, literally thousands of structures. We just recently moved a structure that had a footprint of 56 by 100 foot. It was a 2.5-story field stone house. It weighed 1,135 tons. That there structure is still setting. It's setting over the foundation, and they're putting the footers under it currently. These houses here that we're talking about tonight are a cakewalk compared to what this house was that we just got finished moving. We've moved buildings that were so dilapidated and fallen down, that were historic buildings that the National Park Service wanted to save, and many other folks. With the proper planning, engineering, bracing, tools, and men, these buildings can be moved. It's like anything. If you have the right tools, the right men, the right plan in place, all at the right time, it'll all go right. If you have some of them pictures up from our website, you can show them. Again, these buildings are relatively small. They are movable. I was there. I went through them. I measured them up, and we could engineer them out on a plan and have a certified engineer stamp the plan and go through it and present that to whoever would be approving this for their approval. That's typically what we do on some of these higher profile projects. What we would do on these buildings is we would first dig around them a little bit, or have the excavator dig around them, place steel beam grid work underneath of them. We'd have to cut some holes in the foundation and insert the steel grid work underneath of them, shim everything up using wood blocks and wedges, and preload the whole building on top of our steel before we would pick it off of the foundation. We would then put a unified jacking system underneath the steel framework. We would lift the building up off of its existing foundation, lift it about 4 feet in the air, and then we would take an under excavation machine that we have and go in there and level everything out. And we'd place steel plates on the ground where necessary and put moving dollies on top of the steel plates underneath the steel framework. Our moving dollies have hydraulic cylinders in them. We would then jack the cylinders up and load the house onto the moving dollies. At that point, we would hook everything up on the moving dollies for steering. We have computerized steering, and we would be ready to move the building down the road. It's going to take, the building's going to go at about a walk, a slow walk. Of course, you have wires, you have obstacles. Every time you hit an obstacle, we have to stop until the utility company or the sign company can remove whatever the obstacle is. Is there any questions that anyone would like to ask?
I have a question about that. So have you mapped out the route you would be taking? And are there a number of obstacles in our way for this particular project?
I didn't map out the route. I walked the route. There are a couple of wires that would need to get lifted up. They're pretty wide routes, actually. There's a tree that the limbs hanging over at one spot, and they would need to be trimmed back, but it's relatively open on that route.
Okay.
Any other questions
So perhaps, and I'm not sure if it's your company that does this, but somebody might want to describe a little bit of the steps that need to be taken on the buildings, kind of not related to the physical, rolling them down the street, but what disassembly needs to happen on the original site and what reassembly happens when they get to the new site.
This would all get worked out in an engineered plan that whoever gets presented to could say yay or nay on any of these subjects. I believe that what was being discussed on these buildings was that for the most part, the porches were going to get disassembled on them. All the mechanicals in the crawl space need to be cut off and removed. Everything from the bottom of the floor joist elevation down needs to be removed for mechanicals. The furnace that would be maybe in a crawl space, ductwork, wires, pipes, all that needs to come out ahead of time. Some excavation will need to be performed around the buildings, and any building parts then that are coming off, such as the porches. I'm not sure. There was a fireplace there. I think you were talking about removing. I can't remember what you decided to do with that. But any building parts would get removed at that point before we come in to cut our holes in to insert our steel.
And when
I
you
don't know if I
said,
can jump in there or not.
So I think Commissioner Sarah had a question.
yeah, sorry. So at the site where the building is then going to be placed, the foundation already needs to be in place, correct? The new foundation?
The footers need to be in
okay.
place, and everything graded flush to the top of the footers. We'll move the building across the top of these footers and jack them off of our dollies, and then using jacks, we'll lower the buildings down after the dollies are removed, lower the building down to the height where they're going to get set permanent. At that point, a mason can come in and he will install the wall underneath the building.
Hey, somebody here?
Okay.
Hey, Roger, you need to mute yourself.
Now, so turn the lights off.
Oh, here we go.
We moved between the White House and the wall on the National Mall in DC. We moved a stone building that had a 2-foot thick field stone wall, and it needed to get moved back off of the street. And so we moved that one using this same method, means and methods. That building there, it had the main fiber optics that fed all the politicians down there, fed Congress, the White House. So there was no excavation allowed on that project. Everything we'd done was from above the ground, and it was a little challenging, took a little longer. But these buildings here, we can do excavation, we can dig down, and it makes it much easier.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, so the new footer will be in place, and then you guys bring it over and it will rest on your steel until a mason or whatever trade is going to be putting in some sort of stem wall, and then you guys will remove your steel.
That's correct. When they put their
Okay.
stem wall in, they'll run the stem wall up and grout it tight to the bottom of the brick wall that we're moving.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
that way they're fitting the stem wall foundation to the house like a glove.
Right. Because it's not going to be
And-
flush or square. So, okay, that makes
Right.
sense. I just was trying to understand
then-
that process.
After that's all cured, then we'll come in and lower our framework down and remove the steel.
Okay.
And then they can fill in them holes where our steel come out of with masonry.
All right.
I have a question. This is Darcy Hazelbaker. So when you're starting this process, are there any clues or indicators that you've ever come across that indicate maybe it's not going to be a safe move, or there are going to be some issues, and have you been able to, I guess, like preempt that, or have there ever been any troubles in moving one in the past?
Well, I was there on this project and went through every one of these houses. I have went through literally thousands. We have moved thousands of houses. And I do not see any issues with these projects. Where something will come up, and again, you can see the damage. There's no damage on these buildings structurally to that extent. But this will all get worked out in an engineered moving print, a moving plan. It'll all be laid out ahead of time. It's just numbers. It's weights, it's calculations, and it's numbers. And it all gets worked out in advance. And everybody will know what's happening in advance. So to answer your question, every occupation that is out there has its issues in some way. If we get a lot of mud, which I don't foresee that in your area, mud can create slippery. You know, you could get stuck. You have to lay down steel plates. But as far as structural issues, you put your steel framework in according to the plan, and there might be some things that need to be tweaked. You know, once you get into installing the steel under the house, and you may need to put an extra piece of steel in here or there, and you may need to brace it a little different or move your steel because a chimney is just moved a little bit or the way it's built. But to answer your question, no, there's no unforeseeable issues on these houses that would be obstacles that were just too big to overcome.
Mm-hmm. And let's just say that there is one. Who takes the responsibility for, putting the house back together if something drastic happens?
You mean if the house falls apart?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't anticipate it, but I just want to ask the question. Where does the responsibility lie?
So
Yeah.
there'll be we are fully insured. So that would all need to be gone over, so everybody understands on both sides of what that insurance is, what it covers, and how it applies.
Yeah.
I think we have 10.
In contractually, Darcy,
Uh-huh.
this is Sam Ireland here. I believe it's Capstone owns it's in Capstone's insurance until it hits the site, the Ireland site, and then once it's successfully on site, it becomes our problem.
Correct.
Sam, can I follow up on just because that
Yeah.
distinction is, I know we've talked about that a couple of times before.
Yeah,
By successfully on the site, does that include putting the chimneys back and putting the porches back? And
that's on Team Ireland.
that's on Team
but-
Ireland. Oh, okay.
But Capstone is helping us with some of that work. It's in our contract, private contracts, but it's on us. Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
Chair McDonald, basically the idea is functionally is Capstone will take care of moving them, having everything set. Once they're set and our Mark's team is, off-site and the homes are now set, they then are the new owner's property, at which point they'll do the improvements that they have to do contractually, and there'll be funds for that work to be done.
I should add, this is Marcellus Rusk. I'm representing the Irelands. This came up in the past meeting. We will then apply, beyond reconstructing the porches and chimneys to the way they are before moving. We will also apply for what renovations the Irelands want to do to the structures to make them habitable and rentable, et cetera. So that's a separate, we're going to have to come through historic again for each one of those structures to be scrutinized and reviewed by historic, beyond what they look like today, because they're going to do renovations, interior renovations that might affect the exterior. That'll all come through in a separate process once they're in place. But right now, it's just like with Capstone arguing about, investing the money in the new structure they want to put there. The Irelands do not own these properties yet, and they haven't invested the money yet in, new plans and renovation plans and review materials.
But I can tell you the gist of it is to keep them what's the term, as like or whatever. Like it's not.
As substantially similar to the way they are now as possible. Mostly it'll be interior renovations that'll have to come through review anyway, but the intention is to make minimal or no changes to the exterior beyond repairs.
Yeah, I think, Chair McDonald, I think the way to look at it is if, once they're placed, they would be like any other home in the district, subject to the same rules and requirements. And it'd almost be like doing TI work if they were going into, just rehab existing structures and stuff.
Sure. I think I understand both what you're saying, Noel, and what Marcel is saying. Darcy, you had your hand up.
Just one more question. Are you guys going to do like a soils engineering test or anything like that to make sure that the soil is ready to have these new homes placed on the site?
Yeah, that's all part of the, the pre-moving process. Having the footers engineered for the weight that they're going to receive, soils test to see if the soil can support them, and engineering the stem walls beforehand, the design of the stem walls ready to be constructed once the buildings are hovering over the footers.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I think there's kind of two things about the rehab on site that I think of. One is, Marcellus, I know that the Irelands and Sam, I know you guys want to do improvements to the homes once you get them. But there's also, even before you get to that point, are they going to be put together? And I'm kind of hearing that's kind of on the Irelands once they do that. Not just the reconnection to the utilities, but also putting the chimney back on, using the same materials for the stem walls, using the cobblestones.
Yeah, and just to ease your mind about that, there's money earmarked in our contract with Capstone to provide for all that foundation work, the chimneys, it's like it's dictated by contracts that all that comes together.
And it's described in the package before you that
Right.
It'll be reconstructed like for like as they are now. That's part of the initial moving process before any renovations that Ireland's intend to do later.
Yeah, thank you, Marcellus, for that, because that's kind of what I was going to ask next. I mean, we do have this package, you can't see it, but, and I know there's work beyond what's in here to make them habitable or to change appliances or whatever. But is this document representative of what's actually going to be done first? Yeah, if you just go like to there, right, page 55.
Right, anything basically anything removed like a porch or a chimney is reconstructed on site as part of the moving process. I mean, obviously it's not, but it's going to be a follow-up to the moving process before it comes through a separate package on what they want to do it later. The idea is to get it on their site as it is now. You know, once it's set up on the site and it's reconstructed, they'll be essentially the same structures they are now, and then it'll come before you for review, whatever wants to be done later.
Done later, sure, that makes sense. So the package that we have before us right now, starting with this page and the 6 pages after it or 7 pages after it, is what is being committed to do to get the buildings situated, whether it's the Ireland's responsibility or Capstone's responsibility. This is what we're being asked to approve with respect to how they would be situated on site.
Correct.
Correct, Jim.
Okay.
And I think, as far as kind of the scope, each one of these pages kind of covers, sort of what that exterior rehab component will be. That's part of the obligations here for the completion of each one of them. So each page, I don't know if anyone has any specific questions on any of the structures or not, but if you do. But essentially, all those primary exterior elements, chimney rebuilding, redoing the porches, fixing fascia and exposed rafters, repairing glass as needed, fixing up the window frames, and doing that, and obviously consistent with the regulations in Tucson, new roofs, as far as shingles and things. This one's the one, obviously, it's being demolished. I know that one's come up a bit, and I'll talk about that next. Again, the chimney. So you can see on all of these other homes, all those exterior elements will be in place. So I don't know if there's any other questions for Mark on the moving side.
All right. No other questions from the board for the mover?
All right. Thank you, Mark, for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. I know it's a little later where you're at, so thank you for joining us.
Sure, it was a pleasure. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks a lot.
So now for the board, notwithstanding the actual, picking up the building, putting it on wheels and moving it, are there any other questions or concerns any of the members have with respect to this document that's, I guess this is Noel showing with right now for each one of the individual sites?
I just have a question. Are we at some point going to talk about the sort of overarching scope of this and why the buildings are being moved in the first place and that they can't be rehabbed on site? Or do we want to go through the scope of work and then circle back around to sort of larger conversations? Or is that not on the table tonight for part of the discussion?
Well, by larger scope of work, I think parts of that are on the table. The Capstone folks are not prepared, nor is it really part of the city's process right now to talk about the replacement plan that they have for what they're going to build on site. But with respect to some of the things that you just asked, Darcy, regarding what else could be done with the buildings on the site they're on right now, especially the one that's being slated for demolishing. And in fact, I have to ask too, there's 2 contributing structures that you're proposing to demolish, right? Because there's another contributing structure at 818 Speedway that I believe is not being moved.
The only home that we've proposed for demolishment is the 1052 Euclid. All of the other contributors would be moved. Anything that's on site that's there's some non-contributing outbuildings. But
you may not be aware, and I could be wrong, Jody, you can correct me, but if according to the city's website, on 8/18, the outbuilding is contributing.
This one here, Chairman, or
Yes, that one.
structure. It was the first I've been made aware of that. Roger, I don't know if you've got any additional information.
That's the first I've heard that, and I would have to go back and check that, but that's.
I'm pretty sure it's like a cinder block 1950s. I don't think it's in the period of historical significance, but
I don't think it's on the SHPO list. I'm not sure about the city,
It's on the city's list.
but it's not. I went through the SHPO list very carefully about the five and worked through that.
Marcellus, do you have
Never
a-
come up with question? So
Yeah, Marcellus?
It might be a situation where sometimes, things in the inventory when they first set up shouldn't have been there. It's definitely not eligible to be contributing. It might be something where we might have to document it and talk to the city about having it removed from the inventory because it's built after 1930. And there's several other things that disqualify it, but whether or not it is listed, it's not a building that's eligible. So I wasn't aware of that either, but I'm familiar with the structure, and it's not, it shouldn't be eligible for our inventory in this neighborhood. That might be a clerical thing that we need to establish with the city.
All right, so, yeah, I guess you guys do need to go do that. And I don't know, Jody, if you're looking online, if you can add anything to that right now, or if that should be taken offline, but it is on the city's GIS listed as contributing. And it's on the.
if you can send that out to us, that'd be great. Jody, thank you.
It is noted, there is a comment on the inventory form about a brick house in the rear. But I will have to look at this a little bit further. We do occasionally have, as Marcellus pointed out, corrections that we need to make. So I'll look further into this.
Okay.
If I might, this is Scott Salter. That structure you're referring to was an automotive storage facility that was basically a carport garage that was turned into a studio, one-bedroom apartment after it had been converted. So
Yeah, let's just make sure that we're all talking off the same sheet of music with respect to contributing, non-contributing, eligible,
It's a carport.
non-eligible. Whatever it is, I just want to get I want to make sure administratively it's cleared up. So going back to the point that Darcy had made about the sort of the bigger scope here, I want to open it up to the board for general questions about these buildings, the way they're being treated, the Adobe. I don't know, Noel, if you've got other comments you want to make with respect to the Adobe since you're proposing demolishing it.
Yes, Chairman. On the Adobe, it's been it's a challenging structure, as I mentioned before, and we actually did contract a structural engineer to take a look at it, and they went through it and found significant concerns. There's been some fire damage. About 30% of the roof has been damaged, as well as some cracking and other elements. Their big concern, is the trying to move this particular structure. Their concern came into the lack of integrity of the roof and what that would mean for moving it. As you can saw in the photographs, generally they're moving structures that are fairly solid shape. So his recommendations involved a significant amount of effort to try to collapse the thing together to move it, but there are some pretty significant concerns. Roger, do you have anything more on this Adobe also that kind of factors into some of that analysis?
Yeah, I think there are some cavities in the masonry walls. So the masonry walls would have to be rebuilt to get around the damage that was done to the inside. There's also not a contiguous floor in here, and the condition is pretty looks like somebody tried to rehab it and stopped because some of the walls are gone, some of the features are gone.
So
but
if I,
nothing's
if,
going
if
out.
I,
So-
if
so
I
the
may, because
condition of
I'm
the
gonna,
inside
I'm gonna
has-
use one of these opportunities here, Roger, to kind of watch the time that you guys have so
Yeah.
that we don't get too far down a path. I know it's hard to move. I mean, you know, I get it. And I know that it's got integrity issues. So I don't think the argument of it's hard to move, so we should tear it down is what we're looking for. It's what, you know, this is one of the few historic bungalows left in the inventory of the city. A lot got torn down, unfortunately, and you know, when significant work was done downtown. So what thoughts have been made to preserve and protect this building and keep it from becoming something in the trash heap, I guess. And that's my way of wording it. And I welcome the other board members maybe to word their concerns a little bit more eloquently. But that it is hard to move can't be the reason that you're going to tear it down.
Chairman Dole, and that's fair. And I think where that kind of comes into play is in, again, kind of as we talked about before, about looking at the site and trying to plan around these structures. If this structure was sitting, you know, down at the corner and, you know, maybe a little bit different as far as trying to move it a little bit out of the way. Unfortunately, it sits kind of in the middle of everything, which made trying to design around it impractical. And, you know, at the end of the day, and looking at the resources that were there, finding the 5 and being able to make those work and having confidence that those are movable and rehabable, as well as getting into the cost of the rehab component itself. Well, you know, in addition to the challenges of moving it and it surviving the move, you also get into the significant damage and rehab that it needs. And then the question of whether or not, even after all of that rehab, if it still be contributing because of the amount of effort and modification that would need to be done to make it a safe structure, even if relocated.
Noel, can you speak to the other buildings that you're hoping to keep on site?
Well, as far as the other 5, you know, they're, you know, in addition to being survivable, their rehab conditions better. So you've got
I think Sam was asking Noel about the ones that are not being moved.
Oh, these two.
Yeah.
Those two, because of you know, as we've gone through this process, these properties became available. So we've, you know, added those to the plan. And because of their location, we can actually work around them because you have a square space. It's not a tooth situation where it's kind of in the middle. And so that component we were able to preserve in place those 2 structures. They'll get a similar exterior rehab treatment. It's what's being done to the ones that are relocated.
Can I add
Go ahead,
something real
Marcelo.
quick to the Adobe structure issue? It is beyond just it's difficult to move, like Noel and Roger were getting at. It's cost prohibitive to renovate it, whether it stays in place or not. There's no interior fixtures of any kind. Electrical, plumbing are all ripped out. Everything would have to be installed to make it habitable. Also, you know, there's the Adobe is not just cracked. It has a kind of basal deterioration at the base of the walls. It would need a lot of careful hand repointing and bricks being removed and replaced. It would be more expensive than the property is worth. I don't think, you know, we haven't done a formal economic study, but based on my previous experience working with repairing Adobe structures, they are exceedingly expensive to repair. There's so much labor involved. And then the fact that it's an empty shell right now. So anybody that wanted to rehab it for living, office, rental would have to put a lot of money in. It's basically an empty shell. So it costs a lot to repair the existing structure. And then you're at zero to getting it to the point where it's occupiable with fixtures, et cetera.
Yeah.
In terms of historic preservation, also, I just sort of like to add a thought that when these homes were built, they were in a residential setting. Now they're in the middle of basically what's a commercial area. And I don't think their original context has been completely misplaced. And in some ways, I don't know if like keeping them where they are is good for the buildings in terms of like, I don't know who's going to choose to invest in a building that's surrounded by mostly commercial property.
Yeah, and Chair McDonald, I think one of the challenges that I think that we have as we look at this, sometimes on an individual basis, some are stronger than others. I think to the economic issue, and that might be a good item to turn to. These structures, in addition to, their exterior condition, obviously needing some upgrades, their interior components are well past their useful life, either, missing or, at a point where it needs, some significant investment. Having just bought a new air conditioner and air handler for my house, it's an exciting prospect. We have to start undertaking mechanical systems, whether they be electrical, air handling, water, and of course roof. So these, not only do you have the mechanical systems that you have to worry about maintaining and the integrity of the home, but as you know, your interior fixtures and just the generalized appearance. So there's a lot of expense in these structures as far as trying to maintain them, much less keep them, making enough economic sense to keep. So in their current scenario where they're at today, these don't generate a whole lot of rent, and part of that has to do with the fact that they're, again, their context, and to Sam's point, they're contextually where they're at right now, between the traffic volumes and the intensity there and their proximity to the road don't make the best rental units. Are there options to take an individual structure and try to adaptively reuse this? I'm sure there are options. Those are expensive projects to do. We've got a number of clients that have done things like downtown Phoenix here, for example, along Roosevelt Row, where they've done adaptive reuses. Homes in particular challenging. I've got one right now where there were 3 bungalow type structures. The client was going to do 3 restaurant concepts and has now basically reverted that to more of a rental Airbnb concept because of the challenges there. And those types of uses are, again, from a revenue standpoint, to justify a very expensive investment. And, again, not to put specific numbers to it, but I think some of the just kind of ballpark ranges, when you start talking about putting $500,000, into a property, you have to make a return on that at the end of the day. And that, unfortunately, because of the condition of these homes, is extremely challenging. So what was kind of unique about this as we looked at the different properties and thinking about, how best to again, get investment into them. This is a very unique situation. So we have a situation where the eventual project makes enough economic sense to pay for the investment in these homes that's above and beyond what you typically do with a structure at its location and age. So if I bifurcated these out into individual units, economically, none of this makes sense. Moving them, even the rehab, even if you leave the move out, the rehab itself is pretty challenging from an economic model. So it's a little bit different than, kind of the typical, we've got an existing structure, we'd like to demo it and build something else. This is more of a, holistic project that provides an opportunity to, not only move these 5, but also to preserve in place these other 2. So it's trying to keep, that idea of it being holistic.
Darcy has a question.
Well, I have several things I want to say. There was a home at 1030 North Euclid that sold, I think, just about a year ago for $325,000. And there have been several other homes that have sold on Euclid recently at a really decent market rate. And their proximity to Euclid is very similar to these houses. Secondly, you know, I think for me, the bigger issue relates to the main gate overlay and preservation zone, and that there are several items in there that encourage preservation and protection of houses before they're demoed or relocated. And so the thing that's not sitting well with me is that these houses are viable enough to be moved and restored, but they're not viable enough from your economic standpoint to be left in place. But they are some of the last remaining vestiges of this overlay zone that hasn't turned into, you know, 10, 14, 17 story houses. And this is in my opinion, a significant corner that still remains as part of a gateway to what used to be there. So I just am having a really hard time listening to everyone convince themselves that these houses aren't worth staying in place, but they're worth being moved and fixed up. And really, I understand that it just comes down to numbers, but there are other things that are important to the city's fabric and the contribution of value of a place. And part of that relates to them being at their site that they were originally constructed, not relocated to another part of the neighborhood.
Can I make 2 points? One is 4 of the structures right now, which, you know, and the ones on Speedway and the Adobe are in very poor repair. And it's not so much who's going to put money into it, it's the fact that nobody has put money into them. They are all, you know, being neglected. They're not bringing in much revenue. I mean, beyond looking at who's going to develop this, who's going to invest money in it, etc. Right now, they're not being invested because I think most of the homeowners realize that that corner is doomed because of what Sam said earlier about how they've lost the kind of context they're in, not because of anything that the structures themselves have done, but the fact that they've now been completely surrounded.
Yeah, but that
It doesn't justify it. But the fact is,
it doesn't make the case to continue doing this to our city.
But in that case, I mean, who's going to invest the money to renovate them where they are? So far, nobody has.
Why can't it turn into a Broadway corridor situation where these houses are updated, moved if needed, and turned into commercial spaces that could serve student housing or elderly? Why does it all have to be more student housing?
So far, no one, the people that make the money decisions that invest in these things, no one has gone for that. No one has invested the money in even restoring them, let alone, you know, developing them in any way. So, I mean, that's the thing about the way they are now is they're being neglected. They're getting worse and worse since I've lived in the neighborhood, and no one is investing in them where they are.
And Commissioner Hazelberg, I do appreciate your point, and it's valid. It's not, you know, it's very challenging with these types of sites in, you know, trying to forward a number of different goals. And I think, you know, when you look at what we've tried to achieve here, you know, was trying to preserve these structures for the integrity of the district. And I think with the great work Roger did with SHPO, and you know, obviously with Joel and being willing to take these on, you know, right now what I have is, you know, I've got, well, now I've got 8. I've got eight structures. My client's willing to, you know, again, preserve 7 of those. Not only keep them in the district, but also to rehab them and bring them back up to being habitable, being back to their original purpose, which was for being a home. You know, new mechanical, new, you know, plumbing, the exteriors get rehabbed, everything gets brought back up. The trade-off for that, and that's just the balancing act we have, is that that can't make sense in their current location. Now, some of the alternatives, you know, obviously would be if this project didn't happen, you know, somebody may come along who wants to take 1 or 2 of them and do something fun. You know, I don't know. I know my client's interested in doing. And so it just becomes kind of that, you know, I feel we've, with this team, have put a lot of effort into trying to achieve as many of the goals as we can within the constraints of the, you know, obviously the economic in which we're operating. I think we got
somebody needs to mute.
Getting some reverb, guys.
And so you know, I don't have a good answer for, you know, trying to keep them in place, because again, that's not our project. Our project and what we're proposing to the community is we're trying to achieve as many goals as we can, so that, you know, very significant, a very significant investment in these houses, keeping them in the district. We do have the confirmation that they'd still be contributors. And, you know, 2 would remain on site and preserved in place, and those would get preservation easements and all of that. So, you know, on one side of the coin, you know, it's not 100%. On the other side of the coin, presuming, you know, the community is amenable to this project, at the end of the day, this corner will be, you know, reimagined. You know, obviously we'll be back on the design side of that. But also, you know, that gateway element still gets retained, you know, as you get to past the church property, where you start to see the single family residences reappear. You know, that gets maintained, and that frame that'll be permanent. So this, you know, there won't really be any more conversations about main gate anymore, because the projects will be done and the preservation will take place.
If I can just jump in here really quick about the nature of like student housing. So I don't know, it's interesting. The neighborhood itself is called West University. So I don't know where the idea comes that we don't have student housing or somewhere. The way historically that my family came upon having this lot to be able to move these houses is that we saved it from a mini dorm developer. So as someone who grew up in this neighborhood, and as someone who cares about the character and context of the neighborhood, you know, student housing is with us. We have to have students. I'm not sure, like if the preference is for more integration into the neighborhoods, mini dorms, or if you want, you know, there's not a lot of, there's a market need for student housing. So, and I don't know, you know, I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of good, you know?
This is Damon. I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, Damon, go ahead.
So I think, to be totally honest, I think we're a little bit off subject. I don't think this is or should be a referendum on student housing and whether or not people who live within the neighborhood like it or don't like it. I think it's kind of simple what this comes down to. And I mean, I appreciate what you guys are proposing and what you're trying to do. And I think you've made some strong arguments, but in the end, there's kind of rules, design guidelines, regulations that are in place that I think we're being asked to judge this project against. And I think it really comes down to reasonable economic use. And I also think it comes down to a clause that's written into the code about whether or not properties should be allowed to essentially be demolished via neglect. And it specifically doesn't allow that. And so, I mean, I guess I sort of feel like we should bring the conversation back to what the board thinks about the proposal. And in my view, I think it comes down to really those two relatively narrow things.
Hi, this is Jamie Fabe. Can I speak on behalf of the existing owners really quickly to your I just want to clarify
A certain segment of them, Jamie, a segment of them. You can't speak for the entire community.
No, not
Thank
those.
you.
I mean, not you guys. I'm talking about, okay, I'm sorry, you're right, correct. I'm not speaking for the Ireland side, but
or the community at large. You're speaking as an
I'm just
individual.
talking on behalf of the sellers, you know, kind of what each, because we work so close, we know each and every one of those properties intimately, and you know, kind of the existing conditions you're speaking to, but what, you know, when they're put together as a whole, clearly there's, you know, there's more value. But with each one of those properties, they're individually owned, and each individual owner has different economic abilities, you know, or financial abilities to spend on rehab. I mean, they're not purposely putting them in neglect. It's that, you know, the two that are currently vacant, those owners, they don't have the money to put into them. And so I guess that my, you know, I just wanted to clarify that, you know, nobody is neglecting them on purpose. It's, and the, you know, the more development that's gone up around them, if they were to be kept, if they were to, let's say they could be rehabbed and rented out, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to rent them because there's nobody to, they can't find tenants because of what's surrounding them.
So
Yeah,
I have a comment too. This is Rachel, Sarah. I think, you know, I don't think any one of these, of the 5 to the north that are being talked about relocated, I don't think any of those are site specific. So I feel myself that putting them somewhere into the fabric of the neighborhood versus on the edge where they're getting destroyed makes a lot more sense to me, to keep the inventory of the neighborhood, to move these houses to somewhere where they can get rehabbed and used and be, you know, part of the community again, versus where they are on the outskirts and not viable there. None of these houses are specifically designed to face Speedway or to face Euclid. They could be facing any street within West University and have their historic integrity. And I don't think that we should be so locked into them sitting on this corner that they just aren't site specific to.
Rachel, to your point, then what do we need to be thinking about with the 2 residents that will stay in place, that will become even more enveloped around?
Well, so if you look,
I
mean, their map kind of cuts it off, but there's more houses of that scale behind them to the south and across the street, whereas these 5 on the corner are sort of out of context. And the 2 that are staying are similar to the ones that are just to the south that are actually owned by the Marshall Foundation.
And Roger or Noel, can you speak to the single family residences in terms of the scope of the project?
Yeah, so thank you, and it's a good concern. The plan would be for these 2 to be developed as part of the project, rehabbed, restored, and then we would do facade easements, historic easements on those structures to keep them protected, both from just a development standpoint as by being included, but also with an actual easement that would compel that they remain as is. But because they'd be part of the larger whole, you don't have the fractured ownership issue and the, I don't, you know, for example, if you bought, let's say the Adobe and, you know, put $500,000 into it or $1 million into it, if the house next door sells and either they're just renting it out to whoever, or they open a commercial, you know, try to maybe reuse it for a commercial purpose, that makes it a little hard for somebody to take one of these and take it back to being a residential structure. I think that'd be, you know, again, fairly challenging. With these being as part of the project, again, to the context, was one of the things we liked about these 2 is that they interface nicely with the homes across the street, but also that we could preserve them long-term by programming them into the overall development.
That's kind of my question, was that if they were, I know at one point there was discussion about making them like community spaces, or I don't know where you guys are at in the planning.
Yes, and we haven't figured out the exact program on it. They actually lots of different options, but the idea would be is that they would be part, and they'd be retained as in the same ownership with the rest of the development.
Thanks.
I think too, it's kind of an important thing to acknowledge at this point is that I understand that demolishing, because that's technically what this would be considered, even though we are relocating them and keeping the inventory, you know, we have a team that's willing to do all of these steps with all of these different parties. And I think that that's a really important thing that should be considered in this economic scope. Damien, back to what you were saying of we should not be going outside of what as a board we should be looking at. And I think that that should be part of this, is that we actually have a team that can afford and wants to do this. And I don't know that that's going to happen again. And I think that that should be part of our consideration, is that we could get these 5 houses in a better location that's protected, with a full team and proposal that's going forward. The design of what's to come, yes, I know that's something that we all are a little bit wary of, but that's the cart before the horse. No one can spend all this money and then have it stall out on the first step. So that's why the city has that flow chart. And I think that we just really need to kind of look at the bigger picture in terms of none of these houses are site specific. So keeping them at this corner, I don't think adds value to them. I think they'd actually gain value being relocated and preserved. So.
A question to the board, do we
So
need to
is this-
think about the precedent that we're setting? I think back to my property, our family's property, and our house at one point was unlivable. It was, I mean, for all intents and purposes, probably should have been torn down. And had we had the option to demolish it and build new, you know, we might have. It might have, you know, had it been on the table way back when. So do we need to be concerned about, you know, what precedent or what message this sends to future homeowners who have dilapidated historic buildings?
Yeah,
I think though that we're maintaining the inventory. We were not allowing them to just demolish something. We're maintaining the inventory and keeping the inventory within the neighborhood. I think the issue here is more the site versus the actual buildings. So is where your house is, you know, is that site what was valuable with your historic building?
Yeah, I guess I'm just going back to that Adobe building and you know,
I mean, it has been evaluated and it was part of the packet, and I mean, it's gutted, so it's not really.
Can I let Damon go, please? Damon?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do think it's fair to be concerned about the precedent, and I think I take some of the points that Rachel's making, but in the conversation, you sort of made the argument that we're maintaining the inventory and that some of our concerns are for the future design details that we haven't seen yet. And frankly, that's not really my concern. My concern is actually the demolition of the Adobe structure. And so I just wanted to point out that it's really not a complete maintenance of the existing inventory. And that's the precedent that I do think people should be concerned of, because to me, that is essentially demolition by neglect.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's a fair point.
So Chair McDonald, if you mind, just a thought on that as well. And is, you know, something else thinking about precedent, you know, in an attempt to, you know, again, assemble this into something where there is an economic model that will support, again, 7 homes being, you know, heavily invested in, rehabbed and restored and remain contributors. You know, the other side of the coin is a message that going through that effort, you know, for Capstone here, for example, with 3 years on this project, and I'm sure more money than they cared to spend, to go through the effort to try to keep these contributing, and to, again, put together a project that can basically pay the bills for something of this scale. You know, that does also send another message, you know, that you know, trying to find some creative solutions to these types of properties, and things that may, again, discourage investment from folks. So that's the other side of this too. I just want to, you know, put out there.
If I can just throw something in there too, like there's been a few projects that this, like all of our taxes have paid for, that have moved houses and like literally came from our own pocketbooks, whatever you guys are all taxed at. And here is a solution that's being paid for by a private equity. So I think there's something to be said for the care that's being taken here, and the results of it. I don't know if you're going to find another investor that would take this much care.
Okay, point taken. I think you can tell there's a lot of conflicting ways of looking at this. To Damon's earlier point, I think for today, the things the board has to consider are comparatively narrow compared to the totality of the project. That said, this is what we're supposed to talk about tonight, the demo and move of these buildings. And I'm calling it that we've got like 10, 15 minutes left. And before anybody speaks, I want to go through the board members one last time. I know, Damon, you've had a chance to talk. Rachel, Betsy, Sarah, I haven't heard from you. I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments, but we're coming down to the point where we need a couple of motions on this topic.
This is Sarah. I agree with what Rachel Sarah has said. I agree with what Damien has said. I mean, everybody's got some very valid points. My concern, and I think someone said this is putting the cart before the horse, but my concern is, okay, so we allow these homes to be moved and demolished, and then we have this vacant lot, and we know damn good and well what's going to happen to it. And I think that's a huge concern.
So Sarah, if I may, and again, I don't mean to be impolite. I apologize.
Well, you asked for my opinion, Richard,
No.
and you're going to get it.
No. I'm saying nothing moves until the entire project, including the replacement project, is approved. Nothing happens. If we decide, go ahead and demo them, they still have to do zoning changes, and they have to get the whole, this lot, it will not be vacant because of a decision we made today. It's just wanted to be sure everybody understood.
Well, but I think we all know what the end result will be. And that gives me some really serious concern.
Okay, fair. Okay. So I each one of these properties, including the Adobe, so the 6 of them are, I know, being presented as a package, but there are 6 individual decisions. And I think there's controversy from all of us on the whole package, perhaps, or some of us anyway. And then there's controversy more narrowly on specific ones. In the interest of trying to make some decisions tonight from the advisory board here, I suggest that we start making some motions. We're really coming short on time. We have a couple of options, and I'm just going to throw a couple ideas out, and then I think I need some help from the board here on how we want to assemble our thoughts. Each individual house of the 6, the parcels, can be voted on separately. I realize that's not what Capstone wants because it's a package, but that's not the job of the board. Damon brought up the economic considerations is one of the reasonable economic considerations, not optimal economic considerations. And I realize that what Capstone's proposing might generate a lot more income for the corner, but it's really just is what's a reasonable income for the corner. We do have 3 buildings now that are vacant. Data that was provided to us earlier only showed 1. So there's 2 more that apparently for some reason aren't being rented out anymore. Thoughts from the board? Do you want to vote on each of them individually? Do we want to vote on the package? Does somebody want to just throw together maybe a thought on a motion?
Rick, please vote on them separately because they each have their own HPC number.
Okay.
Because they're all separate parcels, Noel.
Yeah, and Chair and
Okay.
Jody, that's fine with us. And frankly, as you think of each one kind of independently and collectively, I think again, I think that's the right way to go. So that's fine with us.
All right. Well, we can do an up or down vote on each one of the six and do 6 motions. Starting with, I've got the diagram in front of me, 818 East Speedway. Which I believe is currently vacant. Is that correct, Noel?
Correct.
And it's vacant because it's in bad shape or just happens to be vacant right now?
I'd have to let one of the seller's representatives speak to their efforts on trying to lease them.
Okay.
AI. It's been, we've been in this process for 3.5 years. When we started, we had 100% occupancy. This was one of the properties that was the most difficult for the landlords to continue occupancy. The condition of the property, the invasion of the adjacent towers takes away any of the aesthetic value of a single family home. And as a consequence, this home is probably never going to be occupied again.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion, board member, on 818 East Speedway?
So Rick, are we in our, or Jody, I guess, a question for you. Does the motion need to have certain terms in it in terms of, you know, relocation, demolition? What are we looking at?
I think that I think that would be beneficial for you to include the correct terminology in your motion. I would include the address and the HPZ number. It's on the agenda. And just that terminology. I would probably also note that something along the lines of it has shown to be economically feasible or infeasible to maintain the property in its current location or not, however, but yeah, I would definitely include that language so it's clear.
Okay, so economically. Okay.
So may I ask a question to try to understand a little bit more of what I think it was the owner probably who just spoke?
I'm actually the representative of 4 owners who own the 7 parcels that are the southeast corner.
Okay, so my question is, I think in the economic analysis or whatever we're calling it that was provided previously, it shows that the property was rented and had a positive net operating income in 2019.
In 19, it was occupied.
And so can you help us understand what changed?
The condition of the property, the fact that under occupancy, it was still a break-even proposition for the ownership, and it's gotten progressively worse.
Why are you saying it was break even when their net operating income was positive, at least as shown here?
Well, because of the deferred maintenance issues that cannot be addressed under those income levels. I mean, everybody wishes it was different, but it's not.
Yeah, I guess I don't. Okay, I take your point. I think that is an opinion, not a fact.
No, it's actually a financial fact. And I guess in my closing statement, I would like to redirect everyone to the West University Neighborhood Plan, which in
Uh-oh.
Did I just get dropped?
I think we just lost Scott. I had nothing to do with that.
This is Jamie. I work, Scott's my partner. We work together and I also represent those 4 different ownership groups. So I don't think what we did I don't think that they, you know, they actually, or a economic feasibility study was done, you know, that included the cost of the deferred maintenance. I mean, all we were ever showing was just what the rent was. We never, I don't believe anybody's ever put together an analysis that showed, what the cost to maintain the property was, what deferred maintenance was going to cost. And then, again, the issue about why it's now vacant, we weren't able to get any more tenants. Once the tower went up adjacent, it became impossible to lease.
I think there's a couple points.
Let Damon talk.
The maintenance and repair costs are in the document that was provided to us. Deferred maintenance is not, but that's something that all homeowners have to deal with and can pay for over time. The fact that as you defer it gets more expensive is not really, that's something that an owner chose to do. So I don't think, I take your point that this is a difficult economic situation as an owner, but that's not really what we're being asked to address. And I'm a decent human being. I understand the argument you're making. I'm just saying that's not really what we're here to evaluate.
Totally understand.
Okay. Okay, so if I may, let's come back to a motion on 818.
So Rick, am I to understand that each board member is to kind of individually determine what a reasonable
Each board member,
income
I'm
is?
asking each, reasonable is unfortunately it's a soft
Subjective.
term.
Yeah.
So yes, you are.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yes, you are being asked to think about the context, as Darcy brought up a couple times earlier, and the other issues that Damon's brought up. And I really
Just making sure I didn't miss any hard numbers. Okay.
Nope. And we all read the information that was provided to the board. And I'm really wanting to kind of push us. We're now like within 5 minutes of running out of time on this topic, and we can do a continuance, but if we can get a motion on 818, it might then speed up the discussion on the other 5.
I'll make a motion. I don't think anybody's gonna like it.
Okay, go ahead, David.
And I'd like to make a motion for all of the properties at once, because I don't want to say the same thing 8 times. So my motion is to deny what's being proposed, because I don't think it's been shown that it's economically required. And I think it sets a precedent of demolition by neglect.
Okay, so I know Jody asked that we do on each individual one, but I think for the record, do we have a second for that motion?
This is Darcy Hazelbaker. I second.
All right, so before we do a roll call vote, I think for the record, if this motion passes, it would just be a cut and paste. Essentially, Damon saying the same thing 6 times for each one of the individual properties. And maybe that's not exactly the perfect way of doing it, but otherwise we're going to spend a lot of time saying the same thing over and over again. So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye, and I'm going to do a roll call on this one. Darcy Hazelbaker.
Aye.
Sarah Fajardo.
Aye.
Bessie Besnick.
Aye.
Damon Turner.
Aye.
Rachel Sarah.
No.
Nay.
Yeah.
This is Rick McDonald. I say aye. So that is 5 yay and 1 nay. So the recommendation of the board, the advisory board, is that we don't believe the case has been presented to justify what's being asked. I know you got another board to go to.
Well, thank you all for all of your time on this one and careful consideration. I know this taking up a lot of your time, both last meeting and this one as well, and your time and attention to the material. I do appreciate it. And thank you all for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Noel. I appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay. All right, item 5B on the agenda. HPZ 22069, 612 East First Street. I believe, Marcellus, you're speaking to that one?
That's correct.
Okay, you've got half of an hour. Ooh, not half of an hour. If you can do it in less than half an hour, that'd be really good.
I believe we can. May I, let's see, oh, there we go. So this proposal is to add a porch and convert a porch on existing structure 612 East First Street, the Quade residence. And for context, this is Speedway up here. This is First, Second, so it's between First and Second on First Street. The existing structure is, this is the view from First Street. This is the front porch as it exists on the historic structure. The back structure, which is what we would like to replace with our proposal, our proposed replacement, is this kind of 1950s, 60s carport kind of structure, which, for a better context, let me see. This is what it looks like up close. Sorry. It's these kind of, curly Q columns with the extruded aluminum tubes and a corrugated, like an industrial corrugated roof. So the proposal, and then this is the side porch we propose to replace. It exists already as a niche and exists in the historic structure. Someone has come across over the years and put some 2x6s and some rusted corrugated roofing on top of it. We don't know when that originates, but the proposal is to replace that with, this is the rear porch replacement, which would have the same footprint as that carport structure. It's kind of a simplified version of what's in the front. In the front, you have the kind of the barrel arch with a lot of decorative millwork with dental crowning, etc. And this is just to bring it down to a simple gable roof with wooden pillars supporting it. Here's the plan. Existing back door comes out to an open porch attached back to the original roof with matching shingles, light gray asphalt shingles to match the existing. These columns are similar to the ones in the front. These come all the way down to the ground. This is kind of this is another structure in the neighborhood that similar to the porch you see on Old Main with a wooden pedestal with columns above it. So quickly, this is the side porch beyond. If you go to the side porch, it's the existing little niche with the existing concrete stoop. And the proposal is to put in a low sloping roof with millwork that matches the other side, similar columns. And this is because of the slope. I'm proposing that we put a flat steel roof on it, not corrugated, not standing seam. It's a very small area. And the idea would be it wouldn't be visible, it wouldn't be that visible from the ground. It wouldn't be visible at all from First Street. And it would be, low maintenance, long-term solution to that. This is the house in context. First Street. It's right in the middle between Jacobus and Second Avenue. And this is the property card. I believe it was built in, 1918.
Hey, Marcel, this is Rick. Do you mind going back to the previous for
Sure.
a second? Just making sure I understand. I think I do.
This previous?
Yeah, that one. So the low slope metal roof would be
Yes.
on the right side of the house as we're looking at this drawing.
It would be, you can see the existing roof of that porch right here.
Oh, okay, I see it. All right.
And the proposal for the gabled roof sits on the same footprint as this 1950s or 60s corrugated roof. It would just
Okay.
tie back to this existing gable roof.
Yeah, I kind of see that clearly from the drawing. I just want to make sure I was understanding the other one. Thank you.
Can I ask quick, Marcellus, why the flat sheet metal roof, just out of curiosity?
Because of the complexity of the existing roof on that side of the house. Let's see if I have a better picture. It would be difficult to do something similar, like a gable roof, like we're proposing for the other. It makes that side really busy. There's a hip roof and a gable roof that are separated by this little niche. So the simplest solution really is to have a flat roof. And we didn't want to put a built-up roof, which requires constant maintenance and is easy to neglect and become, dilapidated. This is the proposal. This is that it would be low maintenance. It would retain its aesthetic value over long term. That's the logic for the steel roof.
And it's steel, okay.
It would just be flat panel steel too. It wouldn't have. It's just a flat plane.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have corrugations or standing
Right.
seam or anything like that.
It would really appear the same as like a built-up roof. It just would be a different color.
Exactly.
Right.
It'd be literally a flat surface.
Okay.
And are you proposing it be powder coated or something like that?
Yeah, proposing that it be a light gray color to match or be similar to the existing light gray asphalt shingles on the other proposed porch and the existing porch and house.
Okay.
And that's really it. It's just a proposal to replace this porch with the one I showed and basically replace this little makeshift roof with 2 columns and a flat roof.
Can you go back to your elevations, please?
Sure. This is the back porch.
Okay, and the other one?
This is the side porch from the east. And it sticks out a little bit. You can see it sticks out about 20 inches on that side.
Do you have a roof
Out
plan
on-
or site plan?
The roof plan, so it sticks out. They have this little patio, existing patio that sticks out. So it sticks out beyond that, the roof does. Neither of these porches is visible from First Street.
So maybe Rachel, what you want to see is
Do you have any like a roof plan or aerial view?
there's an aerial view that he's got.
There we go. Can you zoom in on that?
Yeah. So that's the little niche that exists. The patio comes out about here and then the roof projects.
It's a weird roof line.
It's a very strange roof line. This is a hipped roof, and then this is a gable with kind of a chopped off hip. That's what I was saying earlier, Damon, that it's a strange geometry to make anything beyond a flat roof there possible.
Yeah, I see it.
I don't have
Okay.
any other questions.
Okay. Any other board member have a question? Damon, are you good?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
I can
Yeah,
make a
don't have
motion.
any- Oh, yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
This is Damon Turner. I motion to approve as presented.
Motion, do we have a
Rachel.
second?
This is Rachel Sarah, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Betsy, I.
Sarah,
Hazel
I.
Hazel Baker, aye.
This is Rick McDonald, aye. So we have unanimous approval.
Thank you very much. You're almost back on schedule.
Yeah, we're gonna
By
try.
the way, I love that house. In case the owner's on, it's adorable.
The owner is on, so they're hearing you.
Good.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to HPZ 22071, 626 North 6th Avenue. If we can stop sharing screen here, and who's going to speak for this one? Is that Bill?
Yeah, I'll walk through the
Okay, there you
drawings.
are. Yep.
Is there any lead into it, or you want me to go?
Well, I can take a shot at a lead in, or maybe better if Jody does. This is a case, maybe most of you are familiar with the property on 6th Avenue where work has already been done, and it's now recognized that it needed to have gone through historic review in the past, and it did not. And so we're looking now at it in that context. And it really, I guess for the board, I would say that I'd like you guys to look at what Bill's going to present as if he was presenting it as work to be done for approval.
All right. So as Richard said, this is a zoning violation. And I mean, just right off the bat, Chris Mooney's here, who's the property owner. And his office is there as well. He apologizes for this. He did not know that this was necessary. I got a call from Chris, who got my name, I think through Lisa Bowers, just to help him out with this once he got the zoning violation. And so we put together this set of documents to show what was done to the property, so that you can review it. And so I'll just walk through this package. So the property is at 626 North 6th Avenue, which is on the east side of 6, just south of 4th Street. It's the elevation that you see right here this is the street elevation, the masonry structure that has a bungalow behind it. What Chris did was he replaced 10 or so deteriorating windows. He turned a window into a door on this facade here, and the around the bungalow. And then he infilled a garage door opening on this masonry facade. All of the windows that he replaced were wood, single hung windows, 1/1. There were no detail grill or anything muttons. And he replaced them with 1/1 single windows that are vinyl in material.
Hey, Bill, can I ask?
What's that?
Can I ask a question about the property, just for understanding purposes? Because I obviously the house is like original, but what I guess is the addition, which is where the garage door was enclosed, like.
Yeah, good question. So this house was built, what, 1925, I think, the bungalow, which is like your typical West University bungalow, but at some point they put a 1-story like, brick box in front of it, which this property inventory says architectural integrity ruined by added red brick attached wing on south side, now a beauty shop. And then it goes on to say that it's significant because it's one of the collection of bungalows in the area and it's contributing to the character of the historic district. Mildly conflicted, and I don't think it's really part of this review. I think no matter what, even if this was a non-contributing property, Chris would have to go through the process, right? And so
correct, yes.
The property inventory form is somewhat another discussion at some other date on what this property really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Thank you. Yeah.
Like, how can the architectural integrity be ruined and then it become a contributing property is the question I would have for Jody and the state. But again, we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, even if it was non-contributing, we'd have to go through this process. To your point, Bill. Yep.
So anyway, here it is. And so it's, one property south of 4th Street. And then on the south side of it is the parking lot that's just north of the house with all the barrel cactus in front of it. And here's our development zone. It is listed as a contributing property, even the little box that they put onto it at some later date. And then you can see the contributing properties located around it. It's a very eclectic kind of development zone, as they most are. This is the west elevation, so facing 6th Avenue. So you can see the bungalow in the back there. There's the bungalow roof right there. And then here's the south elevation with the Clint Eastwood murals, and then on the brick addition, and then the bungalow here in the back. And then here's a close-up picture of the south elevation that is behind those trees. And then the east elevation was a enclosed porch at some point. Not sure at what date that was done. But you can see the north side of that enclosed porch down in the lower left corner, and then the east side of that enclosed porch on this upper right, and then the south side of that porch right there. And then the north elevation of the entire building plus the brick part there at the bottom of the page. Sorry. So we'll walk through each thing that happened. So I put the overall elevation on the bottom and then the specific windows on the top and an aerial to kind of give you some orientation. So this window located right here in the upper left is right here located under the porch of the bungalow. And that was replaced. That was a wood window, single hung, replaced with vinyl. The front door was not replaced, it's existing. There's a door and a window next to that front door that were not replaced. And then there are these two windows on the north side of the brick addition that were not replaced. So the only thing in this picture that you see was replaced was this, and then I'll get to those in a second. Along the north elevation, we have these two windows of the porch, the enclosed porch, that were not replaced. You can see what the wood single hung windows looked like. There's another window located here that was not replaced. And then these two windows located right here were actually wood single hung windows, just like this one with the air conditioning unit, similar in size, that he made smaller and put in fixed vinyl windows. There's a kitchen on the inside. There were air conditioning units and the wood framing and wood sills around it were deteriorating. And then on the west elevation, we have these 5 windows here. The 2 on the right were not replaced and the 3 on the left were. and the door on the left was replaced and the door on the right was not. And then on the south elevation, all three of these windows here were replaced with the vinyl windows. The openings remain the same. And then on the little nook back here, he replaced the door and the window up top. Those openings were all identical. And then finally, on the west facade, you can see that there's a door located right underneath the address number that used to be a window, and he just extended it down to the ground. The width stayed the same. It's an entry door for the studio, and he enclosed the garage door opening with wood frame and stucco. So the opening is more or less still visible, and the texture is different from the brick. So it kind of still remains as something different. And you can see the original outline of the original construction with that. And so, and then I went through the design standards for, the historic preservation zone in the West University, and hopefully you all read that. Everything except for those two windows on the north elevation were, the openings remained the same dimensions. The openings weren't modified. He even, in all cases of the vinyl wood single hung windows, he kept the frames that were attached to the brick walls intact. That weren't deteriorated, except on the porch side. And then, and placed the vinyl window in that, which actually is, kind of the proper thing to do when replacing these windows on historic structures. And I understand there are probably issues with the material choice, but in general, the overall historic fabric was tried to be respected with what he did. That's it. Unless, Chris, is there anything you want to add?
That I am very sorry. I did not know. I would have definitely replaced windows with wood. I've owned this property for 20 years. I never knew that I had, when I replaced windows, that it had to be wood windows. I would have done it.
And actually, Chris, doesn't have to be now wood. It could be clad wood, something more durable. Unfortunately, you picked one material in particular that we really don't want with the vinyl. All right, comments from the board?
I guess I just have a question. I think we're supposed to judge this as if it's being proposed but has not been done. Is that the idea?
Yeah, Jody, I think that's what you're asking us to do, right?
Correct. The work was not permitted.
Okay.
So it's going through the review process like they're proposing it now.
The reason I'm asking is, this is an interesting property with the addition in front that I think, is realistically non-contributing, but is sort of classified as contributing, I guess, because it's connected to the contributing structure. So I think if this work were being proposed, I'm speaking for myself here, not the whole board, but I think we, or at least I, would have been more lenient on the things on the addition that faces the street, the enclosing of the garage door and the changing of a window into a door. I don't know that would have been a problem for me. The vinyl windows on the main contributing structure, I think the board would have taken exception to.
Right. I'm kind of in the same place as Damon. And the two windows in the kitchen that were shrunk, that was on the, unfortunately, that was on the bungalow itself, right?
It's on bungalow, it's on the north facade. Right here. And so it's set back from the street. You can't see it from the street. I'm inside the property with this photograph. But it's not visible from the street.
I think in general, we probably would have been unlikely to allow that, but we may have heard the argument, and if a strong enough argument could have been made, I can imagine we might, if we were to agree to it, we might have asked for some like external representation that the window was once there or something like that. But in general, I think we don't kind of allow that thing.
Right. I mean, I've presented projects where we've changed the openings, like, especially like the west facade of this building where there's a window and we turn it into a door. We don't increase the width. We just make it go straight down. And the boards always kind of look at that as like, well, you know what? You can always go back to a window. That it's not, it doesn't really mess up with the integrity of the structure. It could be reconstructed in some way in the future. I mean,
yeah, there was a recent case where we allowed something like that. It's kind of a
Chase Bank put an ATM in the big window downtown, and that rationale was used for it, which I always found mildly shocking. But anyway, yeah, and I hear you on the west facade. But yes, this is a little different on the north facade.
Okay, do we have any other board comments? No? No, from Darcy. Sarah? Just want to do a roll call here.
I don't have any questions or comments.
Okay, Rachel,
I don't
Betsy,
either.
Sarah doesn't, Betsy,
No.
no.
So the way, I mean, I guess I would like a little clarification on the process, and maybe Jody can speak to this too. This is obviously a tough one, right?
Right.
The owner did this work. It's economically very difficult to remove this work and replace this work. In general, other than those two windows, the work was done with care. The fabric of really the bungalow wasn't damaged. You could probably make some case about some of the details for the south porch, but that whole construction of that south porch is you could argue about the integrity of that. So
Well,
let's say you guys deny this because you're looking at it as if it just exists on its own, that it doesn't exist in reality. It's just on paper, and you would flat out deny this, right? Like you wouldn't go for the vinyl. And
no,
then,
we wouldn't go. Yeah.
So what can be done? I mean, is there any sort of like compromise that can be made, or is it just, does he go down the road and go to PRS?
Let Darcy speak.
I was just going to ask, wasn't there, I'm trying to remember that one case, there was another violation in the past that came before us, and it was like a house maybe on an alley, remember, and they replaced all the windows and they got a violation.
Yeah, that's the
And
house.
I think we asked them, I can't remember what we did, but I feel like we required that they be replaced, but I'm not sure.
You're right. We did. You're talking about the house just east of Anza Park.
Yeah, the Anza Park one. Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll be totally honest. I probably shouldn't say this on the record, but I didn't feel as bad about that one because it was an investment company. In this case, where it's an individual, I really feel horrible about it, but I think we have to apply the same rule.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I think
Yeah.
Damon makes a good point with respect to the I'm kind of looking at the pictures right now, that the brick scabbed on, my words, sorry, editorial, studio entrance and the garage door. I mean, maybe there's a way we could kind of look at that a little funny, but for the main bungalow, the vinyl windows, and then changing the enclosures, I don't see a path for us to be okay with that. I don't personally.
Yeah, I agree about the west facade. I think it's, you know, something like you can still see the marks where the garage door was, so it feels a little bit less like a big deal. It is a little bit harder to like patch in brickwork if you ever want to take it back to window, but it can be done.
Yeah.
Jody was gonna say something. Jody?
No, I was just, I think that you guys are heading in that direction anyways, but you know, it doesn't have to be a full deny or full approval.
Yeah.
You can piecemeal what you are comfortable recommending approval for, and then, you know, what you are not comfortable with.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of heading in that same
Could I-
direction. Oh yeah, go
Excuse me.
ahead, Rachel.
Hey, Bill, could you quickly, maybe from like a site plan or floor plan view, just indicate where or which ones were replaced, kind of like for like, not material, but size?
I don't think that drawing
So
is in here.
there were like, oops.
Hey,
there
I'm sorry, Bill, let me interrupt you real quick here. It's coming up on 8 o'clock. Am I going to lose anybody? Are we going to lose a quorum?
I can stay for a little bit longer.
Okay, I think we're kind of getting close to the end point here, so I just want to make sure we don't time out. Okay, I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Those red dots kind of simulate what was.
So looking at 7.
Probably 8.
7 or 8, okay.
And the two that were changed are right there.
Okay, and then the front, I think we're all in agreement that the front, we're okay with that modification.
And yeah, I know where you guys are sitting. What I want to know is procedurally, you know, you deny this, except for maybe the west facade. And then we go to PRS, they deny it because they want to respect what you're doing. And then it goes to the planning director and he may deny it. Like what happens?
That's a Jody question.
It's a code enforcement issue. So you're still stuck in the same boat of, you know, you're not approved for that work and you need to correct it. So in theory, it's something that code enforcement always works with people to get them to where they need to be. But if that's not happening, it could end up in court with a fine.
I mean, is there an option in this case to look at maybe the ones that are so visually present in the historic bungalow, like that front one by the front door and maybe those kitchen windows, replace those and then let the vinyl be on the south facade and the east facade?
I will add, I kind of forgot this too, but once you were issued a decision letter, I mean, because this is a full review, you technically can appeal it to mayor and council. You
Okay.
have a 14-day appeal period after the decision letter is issued to appeal it to mayor and council.
And is that just the decision letter that's the decision letter from the planning director?
Correct.
Okay.
I think we're kind of in the boat right now, Bill, where we need to be careful. And you've heard of the conversations that we had on the earlier topic, the first one. Kind of as presented, the vinyl windows. It's hard to be flexible on that. I agree with the argument that we could be a little bit more flexible on the brick building that really maybe isn't contributing as much. And then the windows that you enclosed, unfortunately, on the kitchen. I mean, we would have said no, and we're an advisory board.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
But I know in reality, this isn't just a drawing, and it's someone's life, and it's economic.
I got it.
So I just saying, like, we're all human here. This is why we have these meetings. We don't.
Well, I think that's kind of why we're trying to be, not trying to be, we are being very flexible on the west elevation. I think, you might want to think about, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Can we go back to the street view and the view from the parking lot to the south?
So that's a street view, and I'm standing in the middle of the street, actually, of 6th Avenue, looking west there. And then this is a view, like standing just north of those, of that house with all the barrel cactus.
I think I would be inclined to say that the windows on the existing bungalow that are highly visible should go to a wood or wood clad. And maybe the ones that are not as visible, we could make an exception at this point. Does anyone else have a thought?
I think that's fair.
I think my only concern is that we just need to be worried about the precedent that we're setting.
I think that's trying to figure out how to balance being human about this with the precedent.
No,
I don't want somebody coming back to the board and saying, hey, I read the minutes, you guys let somebody else do this, so why am I not allowed to do this?
I hear you. I totally hear you. I respect that.
Yeah.
I sat on the PRS for years, and precedent was always a discussion.
This is Sarah Fajardo. I agree with Rachel, Sarah, that the windows that are obvious and are visible need to be replaced with the wood. That's an absolute. But I think that the ones that aren't as visible, I think we probably could make an exception. But again, there we go with the precedent again, because, I don't mean to be rude, but you've lived in the neighborhood 20 years and you didn't know you had to go down to the city to get a permit? Really? I'm having a really hard time with that one. Really hard time with that one.
I know other people that live in the neighborhood and are also unaware of it. So I don't think we should judge somebody's sort of ignorance of the process. I believe him that he didn't know, but I mean, the reality is we're in this situation and we have to.
Well, but I think that then we go with the precedent of people saying, yeah, ooh, I didn't know. Yeah. And then we end up with all kinds of stuff that is added or subtracted that should not have been. And we're stuck with a precedent.
And I think,
I think, Sarah, that's why we have the board and we still get to make a case by case decision. I definitely get what you're saying, and I think that it is a little suspect, but we have to, I don't know.
I think
it's a hard one.
This discussion that we're having, I think it's the reason why the city asks us to view this as if it hasn't been done yet. And I mean, I feel
Right.
bad too, don't get me wrong, and it totally sucks. And honestly, if I were the gentleman who owns the house, I'd probably appeal it because it is going to be an economic hardship to go and try to redo all this work, and that totally sucks. But nonetheless, our job is to judge it by the rules. And I agree there is some wiggle room on certain things, like Bill brought up earlier. Sometimes there's a window someone wants to turn to a door. We allowed something like that recently, and those are case by case decisions. But in general, we have kind of rules and guidelines that we sort of have to follow. And it sucks. I totally think it sucks, but that's the job. You shouldn't accept being a board member if you're not willing to do that.
I think that's well said.
So, Bill, one of the things I might suggest is when you go to PRS, which I know is the next stop in the journey, you can make a case for what Sarah was talking about the visible, non-visible, and maybe present it in that way and see what kind of judgment you get from them. But I think our read of our rules, our guidelines that we're using compels us to give, and I think we're all kind of good with the brick structure on the west facade. I think, and we'll get a motion here going in a second, but the rest of it, I think we're going to have to probably make a ruling you don't like. But I do agree that the recourse, which is actually helpful from a precedent point of view, is that you go to appeal. And I know it's another step to mayor and council, but you could be successful in that, especially depending on whether you can convince the PRS to be flexible. All right. Any other comments from the board members?
I guess I have one sort of procedural question, and maybe it's for Jody, but in terms of making a motion on this, would it be helpful to the owner if we made a motion to approve with exceptions so it's clear about what he has to change in order to get out of a code violation?
Yes, if you could do that, I'd appreciate any help here I can get.
Because I could imagine a motion where we approve it as presented with the following exceptions: no use of vinyl windows, use of wood or wood clad windows, and no changing of the aspect ratio of those windows. I think it was the north facade.
Right.
Would there be a period of time? I mean, obviously this is catastrophic financially for me. Could I be granted some time to do this? Maybe 1 or 2 windows at a time when I get some money? So I want to fix this. I'm very sorry this happened. If I'd known, I would. It's a very popular, visible place. I mean, I didn't find it. I just wish I would have got the wood done. But if you can help work with time or something, or is another solution, make them look wood? I don't know. Whatever you can help me with, I'd appreciate.
So I think that it's probably not really in the purview of West University to give you the allotted time. Once you get the permit issued, if you're working on it and then, you go slow and you kind of do it. We've definitely had other people who work that way, where as long as they're showing progress, even if it's just like 1 window at a time every 6 months or 8 months or whatever, then I think that shows that you're doing it. And, should code enforcement get involved again, you can prove also that you're working along, moving along, making progress, that kind of thing.
Yeah, to speak to that, I believe it's like every 6 months your permit sort of expires if there's no work being done. And this has kind of been in flux with COVID and everything else. You cannot get extensions and things like that. So you might be able to kind of think of it in that time frame, as Jody said, sort of try to get something done every 6 months. And that might extend your permit out.
And can I ask a question about the vinyl, just since we're almost done here? you guys are looking at your historic guidelines, rewriting them again, right?
Yeah.
And so like looking at this, I'm standing at the property line, probably 10 feet from this window right here. Is that wood or vinyl or aluminum?
Well, it's not really an appearance thing, though. I think specifically with vinyl, it's a little bit of concern about the durability of the material, and I guess
compared to wood.
Well,
come on.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not an argument.
I gotcha, but I will tell you that is part of it.
It's not an argument, and it's not fair.
Well,
we're not here to discuss fairness. We're here to follow the guidelines.
Come on. This isn't a nation made of law. It's a nation made of decision makers. And so we can all have a conversation, and I'm having that.
We can have a conversation. Absolutely. I agree with that.
I think Bill's question is valid. When we went back through, first of all, since we're talking about this, the whole process of updating design guidelines is rather frustrating. I mean, I think we went through and did a pretty deep scrub of it. And if I understand, it took a long time, and frankly, it was a lot of effort. And I think maybe those new guidelines will be in place in 2025 if this board still exists, or something
sooner
like
than
that. Yeah, so the whole process takes a long time is the point I'm trying to make. We did have discussions about acceptable window materials when we went through that. And we chose to maintain the status quo and not allow vinyl.
You understand that the city of Tucson has a very different status quo than the rest of the country when it comes to window materials.
Yeah, sure, but we live in the city of Tucson.
We live in the city of Tucson, yeah.
I would say that I don't agree with that statement, Bill. I think that it varies by city. And I think there's a number of cities that allow aluminum clad windows. And I think that West University has said that they would allow aluminum clad windows along with wood windows. So they have expanded. But I still think there is a fair of hesitancy in a number of cities to allow vinyl.
Okay. It's mildly odd. I find it. I mean, when you look at the window as a casual observer, you do not necessarily think vinyl, wood, metal on these cases. That it's mildly questionable that the integrity and the architectural character isn't necessarily compromised with vinyl versus wood versus aluminum clad versus aluminum. And then the funny thing is you allow screens to go over it all and then you can't even see it. So it gets a little goofy. And I'm just raising a point right now because I have this chance to say it. And I thank you for listening.
Appreciate it. Understand. Okay, so can we get a motion for Bill and Chris?
Did the motion I said roughly before sound?
Yeah, I think it sounded good. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is Damon Turner. I motion to approve with the following exceptions. We'd like the vinyl windows to be replaced with an acceptable material, and we wouldn't allow the change in aspect ratio on the windows on the north facade.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Wait, do we want to make a comment on the garage and the door to window change there? Because we
It's
were okay with
implicit
that.
in what he said, because he's.
Is it? Okay.
I think what
Then we're
Damon
good.
said was, we're good with everything except this.
Got it. Okay, this is Rachel, sir. I second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 And this Rick, aye. Unanimous. Motion passes. Okay.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
See you on the next one.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
See you. Thank you very much. Jody, real quick, are there any staff updates or any future agenda items you want to bring up?
Yeah, just one staff update is that the city is finally, after many delays, going to be going live with our new permitting system, EnerGov, on Halloween, October 31st.
Oh, perfect. Halloween.
The week before, the 21st-ish, the week-ish before, the 21st through the 28th, basically, which is the weekday, we will not be accepting any permits unless it's an emergency or permit. So like your gas needs to be reinstated or something like that.
Okay.
And we're doing that to prep for the EnerGov launch on the 31st. So I just want to let everybody know that. As to future agenda items, well, Capstone will not be on your future agenda item, finally, because I've been prepping that forever as a future agenda item. Other than that, I don't think I have any other future agenda items that we know of just yet.
Okay, cool. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
This is Damon. I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hazel Baker.
All in favor, aye.
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 Somebody did say, okay. This Rick, I say aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all for your extra 20 minutes. I really appreciate it, but at least we got something closed out.
And if nobody has